turn now to the Indlulamithi annual Indlulamithi Day, where National Assembly Speaker Thandi Modise is speaking.
Semi-federal powers is difficult. So it is important for us to say it is a step in the right direction, and we wish you all the best with it. I'm also saying that I'm very happy that South Africa is in a no-surrender spirit. This pandemic is not going to get us down. We are going to have to stand up and take advantage of a crisis that must enable us to look back, to look at the current, and to plan better, and perhaps the space that we are being given by the virus, confining us to our homes and our offices at home, is just the right space for us to look more critically at ourselves, more critically at the capacities that the state has, and to begin to do things which we should have done since 1994. Now, the IMF recent report indicates that many countries face a multi-layered challenge of health shocks, of domestic economic disruptions, of almost zero external trade, of capital flow reverses, and of collapsing commodity prices. So we are in it. Our economy was on its knees long before COVID-19 came. We can accept that our economic uncertainties will last for us a little bit longer than we thought. We can also expect that investment will be long in coming. We are hearing calls for national protectionism globally. We even hear our people beginning to despair. And we can't say that we ourselves, we are not worried, because we look at things and we know that we must shift things. Government has started doing this. They have shifted monies from an already strained budget to try and mitigate the negative impacts of COVID-19, especially amongst the most vulnerable amongst ourselves. But that simply means that shifting the budget from where it was into dealing with the crisis means that a lot more is going to be left undone unless dynamic leadership comes to the fore, better planning is put in, Parliament is on the toes to guard at every little cent that has moved from the left to the right and to wherever it is. So for me, it is important that today we come here because government in South Africa must continue to provide the basics. And that water, that sanitation, that feeding scheme at school, that free medication for the indigent, which sometimes disappears, that shelter which the people need. We need to continue to do that, because if we don't do that, and if we don't focus on building an economy that can enable South Africans to begin to look after themselves rather than to continue to depend on these basics that the government gives, we will not be able to get out of Gwara Gwara. In fact, we might get into a state which is worse than Gwara Gwara. We also accept that inequality has increased in South Africa. This COVID-19 has pointed that out to us. We know that we boast that 10 million children in 20,000 no-fee schools in South Africa have an enrollment of 99% in 2015. That's great. It still doesn't make these children in the no-fee schools equal to the rest of their peers. We also know that we feed 9 out of 12 million children at school. It still does not lessen the hunger throughout South Africa. So it is not that we're not doing something. It is the direction of the doing that we must begin to address. It is the leadership and the supervision that we need to be looking at. Now, our National Development Plan envisioned a developmental state, which means a capacity within the state itself, which means that Parliament must be capacitated to be able to understand, to analyze, to criticize, not only to criticize, but also to make recommendations. It means that the Parliament, having been given the responsibility by the Constitution to represent, but also to ensure that public education and public participation by the general public in the affairs of government happens, must begin to do what it was established to do. We must begin to be there. We must create that capacity. And if we can't create that capacity, we must find different ways of capacitating members so that your man, your child, your woman who is dying of GBV in the streets and in the households of South Africa feels that we are not just sitting there to listen to stories from the executive, to talk amongst ourselves, to argue, and not to do that which is important for them. And that is to begin to talk to South Africans as Parliament, as the representatives of the people. What is our national interest? Do we have one? Why is it so easy for South Africans to see themselves in different corners rather than to come together in times of crisis? What is it about us that we cannot forget petty, racial, gender squabbles at a time of a crisis and begin to say, but I put my country first? What is it that has not happened to Parliament in the last elections? Firstly, we've increased the numbers of women. We should be proud as South Africa that with a woman-heavy Parliament, your policies, your supervision is going to be more focused, because we watch the little sense because we know they count. We should be proud that more and more young people have joined Parliament. It means that my age begins to feel relaxed in training and handing over to people who will be more vigorous in putting the executive to account. It means that these young people will look more critically at policies that are brought to our doorsteps, at treaties that sometimes we sign off without saying to the executive, we do not agree. We do not want our country to participate here. But it also means that with young people, you have people training to take over the leadership of their country. You have people who are focused on productivity. You have people who should focus on national cohesion, because if they start going disarray, this generation of young people, then we have no future, then we have no country into the future. It is these young people, these women, who must work hard to ensure that these standards by which our country is judged with, it will not just be the 3 scenarios. The SDGs at the UN, the Agenda 2063 is bringing its own standards. The region has its own. We participate throughout this continent on peacekeeping missions. We negotiate, we host, we second. All those are resources that South Africa needs to do. So being in a junk status means we need to pull up all our resources. I've been quite impressed, Dr. Fikeni, over the last 3 weeks, because I've noticed that more and more young South Africans, and yes, black South Africans, are coming out innovative. They're putting up businesses which are addressing the needs of this COVID, but are also pushing us into this robotic age that we are moving into. So for me, I would say, yes, Isibujwa, we are there. Headaches, but flickers of hope are there. I think that we need to be on our toes to make sure that we don't slip into this gwara into But I'm also saying that what is my role as a parliamentarian? Firstly, I'm very happy that I will manage to get the report into Parliament. I will manage to push it, especially through the chairpersons of committees, because it is important. You cannot follow up and make recommendations. You cannot look at plans. You cannot look at performance if you do not understand the direction. And this report should be helping us to say to chairpersons, this is what you look for. This is not just the Auditor General's report. This is the public sentiment. This is when you lose it. And I know countries who have really worked, produced, but still lost themselves into areas we don't want to see South Africa degenerating into. So I would want to say congratulations. Thank you very much for bringing us here. We ourselves must now get into these scenarios. We ourselves must make sure that when we ask questions, we are informed. We ourselves must make sure that when we do our oversight in the provinces, in the municipalities, we know what to say and what to look after. So I thank you very much, sir, for inviting us here. Thank you.
All right, that was Thandi Modise. She's the Speaker of Parliament, just giving her comment on the scenario planning discussion that's taking place there, and basically saying that it's important that they have the tools to be able to monitor the implementation of government policy at provincial and local level.